welcome to another video. Today we've got this LG W2452T monitor. This monitor, when plugged in, shows no signs of life, has no power. Pushing the power button does nothing. So I'm suspecting we've got some bad capacitors. I think a lot of the LG monitors from this time typically do have bad capacitors. So let's go ahead and take it apart and see if we can get it up and running once again. So with these monitors, the first thing you need to do is to take the stand off. So there's 4 screws holding that on. Let's remove those. All right, so with the 4 screws out, stand just comes right off. No clips or anything. So the next step then is to remove this plastic bezel along the bottom here. It's just kept in with tabs. So if you have a guitar pick, a spudger, something just to get underneath to try to pry it off, it should come off fairly easily. You want to be careful not to break the plastic. I wouldn't use a metal spudger. You know, definitely could damage the plastic that way, but it should pop off fairly easily. And then the next step, which is where things get a little more difficult, not difficult in the sense that it's hard to do, but difficult in the sense that it's hard to do without breaking the plastic. So there's a little hole on each side here where you want to stick a screwdriver and just kind of lift up. Up meaning in this direction, not up towards the top of the monitor. And again, this is all held in with plastic tabs. So as you work around, you can pop these out. If it's never been taken apart before, which is probably the case for most of these monitors, it's going to be tough and you're going to feel like you might break the plastic. So just go slow. Use the spudger when you need to. Use the guitar pick. It's pretty good quality plastic. It's not typically good. It's going to snap on you, but you do run that risk. But hey, at worst, you know, you've got a monitor that doesn't work, and if it breaks, well, you still have a monitor that doesn't work. You're no worse off. So I've got most of my tabs off here. Just looks like a couple left on this side. Hopefully I can get those off without too much fuss. I'm actually going to use a metal screwdriver. I don't think I have any plastic spudgers around here. I do have one, but I think it's broken. We can try it. Yeah, this spudger has seen better days. It needs to be replaced. So again, just, you know, trying to lift up to get the tabs out. You can also pry the outside of the case away. I just broke my spudger, so we'll go back to metal. So very carefully. And you also want to make sure you're not damaging the LCD screen, which is right next to it. Any sort of force on the edge of the LCD screen is not going to be good for it. So you need to be careful of that as well. So I take this, and I can just kind of move as I go and apply some pressure. Try to lift it up. I can move this along a little bit. Kind of work my way through. So we got 1 tab, which leaves just 1 more, I think. It looks like it's right here. There we go. So we got that off in one piece. A little bit of damage here, sure, but it's going to be under the bezel. No one's going to see it, so not too concerned about it. So the next step is to take the controls off, and they're just kept in with tabs as well. So again, be careful, kind of just lift up on this control, and then you've got your power control, which is held in by 2 plastic tabs. So once those are out, you can very gently flip the monitor on its face. There's my piece of spudger that fell out. And then the back should kind of just lift right off. You want to be careful because things might get caught in the wire guides that are in there. So you don't want to go yanking it off, but everything should be disconnected, hopefully. You can take that off and set it to the side. So when you get these are typically held in with just tape. So I'm going to go ahead and take all this tape off. All right, so I've removed the tape. And now as you can see, this whole assembly is just kind of free floating in here. So what we want to do next is very carefully lift up this main cover here. We could disconnect this if we wanted to, but I prefer not to, just because these connections can be very fiddly and you don't want to pull on the wires to disconnect things. So as you can see, we're connected at both ends. We've got a connection down on this far side, down here. This is what drives the backlights for the display. And then there's a connection here, which is what sends the video data to the board. So we can't just lift this off and get into what we need. Now there is a connection here you can disconnect, a connection here you can disconnect, or you could take these two out here. What I found to be easiest, just kind of slide this back, and then you can take a screwdriver and take off the 4 screws. I need a smaller screwdriver. Take off the 4 screws for the cover for this. And then with the cover off, this can be removed. And now you can flip up the tabs very carefully for these ribbon cables and just kind of slide those out. So with that being free, we can now just lift this entire board away, slide the monitor away from us very carefully so we don't damage the connections to the backlight, and then just kind of lean it here, and we can see that we have access now to the power board, the analog board. So again, that's going to be 3 screws. If you've had it plugged in recently, be careful here because there are some larger capacitors that could store voltage, and you don't want to touch those with your skin. All right, and with those out, we can lift the power board out. The connector does slot in, so you want to be careful not to lift that out. And then over here, we have the ground wire, and it's kind of tucked under the control for the backlights. So we can kind of lift the plastic away and get this screw out. All right. And then this should come out and we should be able to flip it over. So we can disconnect this board now from the digital board and from the backlight control. And want to be careful removing these. Don't pull on the wires, pull on the clip. And now we have our power supply out. So I'm going to take this and I'll meet you back at my bench. All right, we're back on the bench here and we've got the power supply out of the monitor. You can see that there's a clear demarcation with this black silkscreen line for the high voltage side and the low voltage side. Looking at the low voltage side, you can see, well, I don't know if you can see it, but I can see it. These caps, pretty much all of the caps on the low voltage side are expanded and no longer functional. So we'll be replacing those. Got some replacements here. I'll get these desoldered, swap some new ones. These two actually look okay, but I'm going to replace them anyway. So I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 caps to yank out and swap new caps in. So let's do that. So we'll get started. We'll do them one at a time to make sure I get the correct ones in. I don't have a guide telling me what goes where, so I'm just going to do them one at a time to make sure I don't put the wrong cap in the wrong place. So we'll get my flux out and we'll start, I guess, down on this side with these two here. So these are both 10 volt, 1000 microfarad. And that's not both of them, it's just this one. And again, this one doesn't look too bad, neither does the one next to it. They both seem to be fine, but since we're going to be recapping, just doing it anyway. So that's going to be these 2 pins right here. It looks like this one's in a big ground plane, so that might be a little tricky to get out. But we'll give it our best shot, and if we need to crank the soldering iron heat, we can do that to help. So I've got my super wick here, as usual. So let's cut off the used stuff and start with some fresh wick. So we'll do the easy leg first. It doesn't look like it's budging too much. I guess we're getting some solder off, but it looks a little oxidized. Sometimes when they're oxidized, you can add some fresh solder to help get the old solder off. So let me do that.
It looks like it came off pretty well, but I don't think this is going to hurt anything to get some fresh solder on there. Let's see if we can't get that off. Might have to add some more flux. Let's do that. Let's hit it with some flux. Alright, I think we got most of it. I'm still seeing a little bit of solder stuck on there. Now I might actually just increase the temperature of my soldering iron just a little bit, just to help out. Some more flux. I think this other leg is going to be a little trickier because it is on a big ground back plane, it looks like. So it's going to suck all the heat out without letting the solder get hot enough to melt easily. But it looks like we're getting it. And I have soldered my desoldering braid to the trace. That happens sometimes. Just heat it up and pry it off. All right, I think we're making good progress here. All right, let's see if that cap is loose now. All right, so we got the more difficult of the two legs off, but I think we can get it here. All right, so that one's free. So I got my big bag of filled capacitors here. Go ahead and drop that right in. And before I do that, let me take it back out, because I forgot the values. I could go back 10 volt, 1000 microfarads. Let me find those. 1000 microfarad, 10 volts, these guys here. And luckily on this board, the positives and negatives are silk screened on, so we know which way it goes. And we can refer to our cheat sheet as well, which talks about which side's positive, which side's negative. But these larger caps will also have a negative band on them. So you just got to line up the white with the minus, or in this case, the colored in area here. So you can see there's a plus on this side and then negatives over here. So we'll pop that in. And then we'll bend the legs to hold it in place. And we'll hit that with some fresh solder to connect it to the board. And this is the trace that I think is a ground plane. Well, I'm very sure it's a ground plane, so we'll just reflow the whole thing since we did suck a bunch of solder off of it, and to make sure there's a good connection across all of it here. It looks good to me. And then we'll cut the legs off. All right, one done. So next we'll do this one. This was the 25 volt. Can't quite read it. Looks like 680. I got some of those. Volt. All right, so throw that back in there. 35 volt, 680, 25 volt, which I think is what this one is. Yep. So let's take this one out next. Again, we'll use some flux. Get a fresh end on our super wick. Not getting much movement of the solder here. There we go. Okay, one leg is clean. Second leg's being a little stubborn. I think we can get it. And these legs are both bent outward, so we'll just unbend them so we can pull it out. All right, got that one out. So this is 25 volt, 680 microfarad. And we got those here, 25 volt, 680 microfarad. So we'll pop this guy in next. And again, we've got the negative marked on the capacitor with the stripe. Stripe goes to the silkscreened area on this board. We'll plug it in, bend the legs, and hit it with some fresh solder. And then we'll cut the leads off. All right, 2 down. Next we'll go over to these 2 here. I think they are the same. You can read them. 100 microfarad, 16 volt. So we'll take both of those out at the same time since they are the same. It's going to be these pins and these pins here. 2 of those are in the ground plane as well, so it's going to be a little more difficult to get out, but we can manage. We'll start over here with the ground plane side. I think we got that one, so we'll work on this leg. A little more flux while we're here. So this one I'm going to add a little more solder. Looks like that pin's clean. Let's see if we can't wiggle this one out. Alright, well, we got the easy side. The ground plane side seems to be a little stuck, so we can't free it up. There we go. So I got that one out. And we'll take out this other one here. I'll add some more solder to this pin. All right, looks clean. And then we'll work on this ground plane one. I think we have that one too. Alright, so we got the ground plane side out, and it's the other side that's sticking in there. Let's give it a little help. There we go. So again, these were 16 volt, 1000 microfarad. here. Take two of those. Flip those over, make sure we've got negative to negative and negative to negative on this one. Hold those in and bend the pins. And we'll solder those into place. Alright, I'm just going to hit the ground plane with a little more solder because we did suck a bunch of it off. Make sure that's got good coverage. Same over here. Seems pretty reasonable to me. Alright, and then we'll take these leads off. Alright, so that's this cluster done, leaving just these three up here. So I think these two bigger ones are the same. Double check them here. 1000 microfarad, 35 volts. Which I've got here. And they are both the same, so let's take these two off next. So I've got to be careful with this one because I see that there are some SMD resistors right next to the lead of this capacitor. I'm going to be sure not to damage those. It looks like they're going across into the ground plane, so should be okay. It will be just a little bit higher on the difficulty scale. If we do knock them off, doubt there's any schematics out there to figure out what they are to put them back on if we lose them, so be extra careful with these ones. And I will start with the trickiest one first. That way if I screw it up, I don't waste time, doing it last and having to give up on this project. I think I will add some fresh solder to that. Might as well do these other ones while I'm here. It's kind of been a recurring theme with this board. I don't see a ton of corrosion or anything on this board. There's, a little bit of my flux, but all of the traces, all of where the solder is, does look a little oxidized. So I presume this is an older board. I'm not sure when this was manufactured. I don't think it says, but I presume it's just been around for a while and these things do start to oxidize, so probably why we're having a little bit of trouble getting some of this solder off, but nothing we can't work around. Okay, that looks pretty good. We'll do the side that's not on the ground plane now. I think it's going to be the same story here. The ground plane one should come out fairly easily, and the other one's going to be the one that's giving us trouble, but I think we got it there. All right. That one's out. On to the next one, which is the easier of the two. Alright, so we can pop that one off. Alright, there we go. So again, 35 volt, 1000 microfarad on both of those. And these are in the cut tape packaging, which is always fun for me to try to get out of. I got the components out of. It's meant for a machine to go through and separate them. But I think we might be able to get these ones here. Got most of it off. If anybody knows a better way of removing cut tape packaging from components, let me know in the comments. Certainly am not the best at that. Anyway, we got them, so let's insert these two. Again, matching up the silkscreen negative with the negative on the capacitor. We'll pop that guy in, bend the legs, pop the next one in, negative to negative. Looks like there might be some solder stuck in one of these holes here. I think it's this one. Let's see if I can just clean it out of the way a little bit. Here. All right, bend the leads and solder these two in. And again, with the ground plane, I'm just going to add some extra solder because we did take a bunch off. That looks good. Make sure those resistors are all still connected. Looks like they are. And the other lead. We'll do the ground plane on this side. Adding some more solder back in, and other lead here as well. Cool, cool. Let's get rid of these leads. All right, and that leaves with just one more failed capacitor to replace. This was a 25 volt 680 microfarad. Let's go ahead and flex this one. Add some fresh solder to it, because that seems to be the trick at this point. All right. A little bit more flux. Got a clean end of my super wick. And let's start with the ground plane one. Looks like that one cleaned up pretty nicely. And we'll do the other one. These legs are bent over as well, so we'll just try to straighten them out a little and just clip the ends off. I think that one's just going to fall right off. Sure enough, so again, this was a 680 25 volt. Grab one of those. 680 25 volts. So we'll pop these in here. This one in here, bend the leads. And flow this solder back on to reconnect to the ground plane. And again, do the trick of a little bit extra solder just because I took some off. The other leg on there. Clip the leads off. And that should do it for recapping this board. So we replaced the 7 capacitors, 5 of which certainly were swollen and failed. The other 2 just replaced because we're here and we have it out. They looked okay at a glance, but I didn't want to risk it with those. I didn't touch any of the high voltage side capacitors, so if this still isn't working, we'll go ahead and replace those as well. But I think these were definitely failed. So that should be hopefully all we need to do to fix this board. All right, be back with you when we get back to the monitor and do some reassembly. All right, so we're back at the desk where I've got everything disassembled, so let's start putting it back together. I've got my repaired power board. I'll start dropping these components into place. Hopefully we can remember where everything goes. So first we'll reconnect the connector for the backlight. And then we'll reconnect the screw for the ground. Smaller screwdriver for that. All right. And we'll remount power board. The power jack connects in to the chassis here, so that kind of keeps it from moving around. And then we'll reconnect power to the digital board, like so. Just a couple of screws here to hold the power board in. So for reassembly, first thing we want to do is put in the LCD driver board. And so the first thing we have to do there is reconnect these two cables. So I think it's much easier to do that ahead of time rather than trying to put everything back in place and then connect them. There's not much room to play with on them, so kind of just doing that first certainly helps. Then drop the driver board down, and then the cover goes on top of that. Now what you'll see is that with this board, once it's in place, it's basically impossible to get those cables out. They're kind of protected by it, so certainly need to get those cables connected before you install the cover back on top. The cable that goes to the digital board over here can be plugged in afterwards, so we'll do that after. So let's get this secured down so we don't rip it out. And it's just got 4 screws, 1 in each corner. All right, so we've got that. Next we'll want to flip over the main board and plug in that connector that we were just talking about. I'm going to need to spin this sideways so I can see what I'm doing. And there should be plenty of room to get this connected in there. It only goes in one way, but if it's not going in, don't force it. Make sure you've got it the right way. All right, so that's seated in there nicely. There is a second connector on this board that's not used in this particular model. Clearly this monitor is designed with multiple uses in mind, so we're not using that one. And as mentioned before, the tape is what was holding this in. So, you know, just kind of line things back up the best you can. The tape obviously now is not going to be holding things in, so you might want to get some new tape and retape the corners and tape it up there. And you can tape the control strap down as well. I don't happen to have any tape on me, but that should be okay. The back panel will hold things together as well. All right, so once we've got that mostly in place, we do want to put the back panel on next. So for the back panel, we need to install the buttons first of all, because we can't do that once everything's all wired together. So the buttons do go a certain way. The longer ones go more towards the center because there's a gentle curve outwards, so the buttons are shorter as it progresses up. And at least on this one, these buttons don't all quite line up perfectly, but once you kind of get it in there, they should just snap in. All right, so
that kind of just clips back in, nice and sturdy there. And then we've got the button for what will eventually be the power switch. And I believe that clips into these clips here, just like so. We'll tuck the wire kind of out of the way up front, I think. It looks like there's these guides for it here, so we'll tuck it back into the guides. All right, so with those being connected, the next thing we want to do is kind of set the monitor on top, and then we'll have to flip the whole thing over because it does clip up underneath the monitor itself. So do that, set it here, and then just kind of snaps down. And if everything's lined up right, it should just kind of be sitting in there loosely. Now there's nothing holding the screen in place other than just the shape of the cavity that it sits in. So there's nothing else we need to put on there. All right, so with the LCD panel in there, I just want to make sure nothing's pinched. Looks like all my wires are okay. And then we can reinstall the front bezel. That should just go in and on like this. And then it's just got all those plastic tabs that kind of snap in and hold everything together. Like so. All right, I think we got all of them. Nope, missed that one. All right. And then we can reinstall the trim piece here. Again, it's just tabs that snap into place. This monitor is mostly just tabs, not a lot of screws in it. All right. And we can flip it back over and reinstall the base. All right, plug in some power, and unless something went horribly wrong, we should be good to go. And there it is. So power this guy up, and we should see something on the display. There we go. All right, well, thanks for watching the video. Hopefully, if you have one of these and you need help, hopefully you've got bad capacitors, because it's a pretty simple fix once you get inside. So thanks for watching, and have a great rest of your day.